All right. Good evening once again. This is the 1st of March of this Gregorian calendar. Let's just say that year. Good evening. My name is Amuni Israel, and thank you for joining us once again. This is the Lev Project, an extension of Take Time to Heal and Solonomics 101. If you're wondering what all that stuff is, it's just basically a way of saying looking forward to and doing the work that it takes for the restoration of our people in mind, body, and soul. And so Solonomics is just my point of view, the way that I've learned to look at things sometimes. And it's a way that we train our mind to, either we see things topically or we get not only just a deep meaning just for being deep for yourself, like, oh yeah, I'm so deep, but it's actually so that you can be able to extract from life lessons that will help you. Sometimes we like to hoard up information so that we can just seem so deep to others and yet still not able to apply them for ourselves, to better ourselves and to further our personal journey, not in a selfish way, but one that will make, when we speak, our words to carry more weight, one that would allow for, further progress on our personal endeavors. So that's Solonomics. I actually wrote the book. I haven't released it yet. I actually wrote it before I wrote. And for those who don't know, I'm the author of Angry Black Woman Syndrome Revisited. And I actually wrote Solonomics before that point. And basically what it was, or what it is since I've been on this journey for self-healing, really, because that's what I'm a proponent about, unless you're like really, really out there, you might need some help. But I'm a proponent, as you can tell, for community healing, where it is that we come together, we have discussion, because the trauma that we incurred is a communal one, as well as an individual one, but we experienced it communally. And so just for this opportunity, as you see here, we're starting into our 3rd month, or praise be to the Most High, of the Lev Project, that I just really, and not only believe, like I know that just a little bit each day, or a little bit, however often that you can do it and commit to, can really make a difference in the lives of one another. And it doesn't have to be something hugely big. Oftentimes, people come up with these huge, illustrious plans, and but they lack implementation, and they lack, and all praises. Thank you for joining us, Sister Angel, Sister Malaka. As always, sis is on time and she shares the information, and I just thank her so much for just for her encouragement and her just being present, and being willing to share her feedback as well. So I was saying that oftentimes there is a gap between those who are studying this information in their classrooms, in their colleges, in their lectures. There is a gap between them and us. And I say us because, the people who they're, quote, studying, or the people who they're trying to help, and then they don't know how to reach. So there's all these things that sound great on paper, but who's going to be on the front lines? Who's going to be on the ground actually doing the stuff? And what I found out is, just from, doing it, that it's not something that you can do for anyone. We have to do it for ourselves. We can help one another, like I said earlier, and we can have the conversation collectively, but the individual have to have the will. They have to have the desire to want to heal, to even acknowledge that there's something wrong, to do the work. Basically, you got to do the work, every individual. And it's not going to be easy lifting either. It's some serious work if we want real answers as to why, what, how, and all of that stuff. What is the meaning of life? You got to really, really, really be willing to do the work, because it's up, down, and all around. It's not going to come easy. But when we do it communally, if someone is struggling and falling behind, we can help them. But trying to do it for someone, that's not something that would oftentimes prove successful. So again, that's just a little background on myself. I just love the thought of healing on all aspects: physical, mental, emotional, um, spiritual healing. And this is where the people, quote unquote, of the diaspora, transatlantic slave dispersion, or wounded in all of those areas. So there's a lot of work to be done, and it's daily. It's not something we like. We like the hype. And I'm gonna go ahead and get into the story. I'm just giving our people who usually come on a little bit more time as we try to start expeditiously too. That's another part of healing too. That's why I appreciate Sister Angel for always coming on time, because I'm the type of person I like to start on time. Our time is valuable. And part of our healing is to understand why oftentimes they call it colored people time, and where this is coming from, this whole thought of colored people time. I like to study stereotypes. I like to study nuances of our culture to really try to find the root of where it's coming from. And one of the interesting things that I found, because I come from colored people time, quote unquote, or Caribbean people time, where they tell you a time, but they're always late. And as I was reading one book in particular, More Than Chattel is the name of it. And it follows, you can definitely check that book out. It talks about certain forms of resistance that the slaves took. Some of the resistance was running away. Some of it was poisoning. Some of it was burning up, breaking tools to slow up work. And so when you look at the perpetual or the habitual lateness of our people, and you look at it as a form of resistance, when we were forced, no matter how you felt at sunup, to appear, to do a work that you didn't want to do. The only thing that you can do along the way is slow things up. If you weren't the type to want to run away, or you're going to find some kind of passive aggressive way in which to resist. And this was one of them. So we see, as a culture, we have ingrained with us, don't tell me what to do. Don't try to make me appear on time. You get it? I don't know if you get it, because I said that, look at the issue, the cause, the cure is in the cause. So if we look at some of the stuff that we were experiencing, the blowing of the horn, as we're reading in some of these narratives, the blowing of the horn to make sure that you appear, working from sun up to sun, to can't see to can't see, working these long schedules and on someone else's clock for hundreds of years, with resentment and indignation towards the fact that I'm being compelled to work. Now I have an adverse reaction to somebody putting me on a time clock. And it's not every one of us, but as a people, as a collective, you could bet your bottom dollar that if you say the event starts 2, that jammy ain't really starting until 5. So when you look at resentment, when you look at a passive aggressive way in which, and some people don't know why they're habitually late. It's like, I don't know why I'm late. I can't figure it out. And so this is also part of our healing, to begin to respect one another's time, to say that if it is that we're going to appear at 9 o'clock, unless something really crazy happens, we appear at 9 o'clock. And that way everybody respects everybody's time, because everybody's time is valuable, and we move forward like that. So those are little small things that we can look inside of ourselves. One thing with them Europeans, I noticed, if you say something start at 9, for the most part, I'm talking about not individually, but as a people, if you say something start at 9, they outside at 8:45 talking about, oh, you're late. You understand what I'm saying? As a people, we stroll through like 9:30. Oh man, you started early. Look into the thought process of where this is coming from. So we're not just reading, or I'm not just reading or promoting reading the narratives just to read them. We're reading them to give voice to our foreparents who came before us, so that we can get understanding, that when we look at our people and say, what's wrong with us, we can kind of have a yardstick or something to measure the damage, so that we can understand and begin to trace the roots to find out where they're coming from. So that's one of the things that I know some people who are perpetually late, and it irks me to no end. And so I try my utmost to appear on time. Sister Angel says, indeed, sister, I've always seen it as a power seeking to make people wait, and a sign or respect and appreciation of being prompt. Agreed. And I don't think, like you're saying, Right, that's a passive aggressive way of which to say, listen, I'm taking back my power. You're not going to call me and I'm going to appear when you want me to appear. So we have to look at it as a form of resistance that stayed within the psyche, um, and on to this day. So it's something that as a people, it bears looking into. It definitely bears looking into. So I want to thank you for being on time all the time. All praise be to the Most. I have an aunt like that also. If you tell her, 9 o'clock, can you come help me at 9 o'clock? You better believe she's showing up at 9 o'clock. And I always appreciate her for just being that timely. It really puts you on point. And like Sister said, to learn to appreciate and respect one another. So people like, oh, Black people don't respect one another. Well, that's a place that we can start. It's something that no one is going to come and do for you. And you have all the power in the world to change that. So if you just joined us and you missed out on the light and the truth of slavery, Aaron's history, it was very interesting yesterday. It wasn't what I expected. As I prefaced the reading, there wasn't a preface really, but as I glanced at some of the ones before, I'm reading as I'm reading it with you guys. It's my first time reading it, and this one is one of them. And from what we found out, he couldn't read or write, but he was determined to have his story recorded. So he walked about the North and walked about looking for the kindness of strangers to help pen portions of his work. And it's reflective in the way the narrative reads, but I think it's very interesting as he's able to show us some interesting things through their words, I guess. And some of it for me, like I said yesterday, they seem like they're putting in their own 2 cents. But just that determination to get your story written at this space and time, I think is interesting. So we're going to pick up at page 19. It says, hold on. Let's make this bigger here. I usually like to read off the book. I don't like to read long off the computer. So I gotta dim the screen. It says a great many people tell me about this awful bad amalgamation business. And they think when friendly people took me in and set me down to the table to eat with them, and when their acquaintances come to see them and see Aaron sitting up to the table eating with them, it draws a dead damp on them. It is like Andy and Anthony. 1 second, please. Okay. Andy and Anthony. Aaron thinks if they would only look in the South where I come from, it will be a complete ballot box for them. They will put their hand right on their mouth and never utter another word of amalgamation or anything else. In the South, white man won't suffer black man to look at a white woman, but they will go and force black woman. And there ain't A or Anthony said about it. The very old devil has got his own foot right on the slaveholder's own neck. And Aaron thinks the poor slaveholder cannot see sin and folly until he is shut up among the damned in hell forever. And that was important because that goes even, we see that trickle down even today. He says you can't look. They couldn't, the quote unquote slave or the enslaved, the black man could not look at a European woman. And at the same token, it was the same rules didn't apply. And women, our mothers, sisters, daughters were violated without any recourse. It says, when Aaron falls in with sincere Christian people, they treat me like a brother, but not as a slave. And they let the wayfaring Aaron eat when they eat and don't keep me waiting till they're done eating. And they give me a crust of bread and a piece of old stale meat in the kitchen, the way a great many ministers do in my travels. Aaron says he should as live go to hear the devil preach as to hear some ministers, because he's funny. He said he should go and hear the devil preach as to hear some ministers, because they preach one thing and practice another and don't begin to live up to their doctrine. We should always practice what we preach to others, for a man of words and not of deeds is like a garden full of weeds. So Aaron says. I tell you, even though Aaron's dropping his knowledge, that's why I see why he's dropping the knowledge, even though he can't quote unquote read and write. He's dropping it. From Georgia's, and this is a poem, from Georgia's southern mountains, Potomac's either strand, where Carolina's fountains roll down their golden sand. From many a lonely river, from many a sunny plain, they call us to deliver their land from error's chain. Shall we whose souls are lighted with wisdom from on high, shall we to men benighted the lamp of life deny? Salvation, oh salvation, the joyful sound proclaim, till in every station, till all in every station shall learn he put in Messiah's name. What though fair freedom breezes blow softly over our land, and each one as he pleases may worship with his hand. And though with lavish kindness the gospel gifts are strown, the Negro is in his blindness, is left to grope alone. Ye masters tell his story, and you herald preach, and to the slave his glory let every Christian teach, till from our ransom natures the change of bondage fall. And he puts J here, only his master shall freely reign over all. And then now he goes to selections from the Bible. This is a time where Christianity was heavily throughout the land, especially in the South. And even if they did not allow the slave to understand really what the Bible was saying, they taught their version of Christianity. And this is what a lot of our foreparents were exposed to. So this is what we're hearing. It says, selections from the Bible. Paul to Galatians chapter 5:19. Now the works of flesh are manifest, which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulation, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, etc. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, faith, and meekness. Temperance. Against such there is no law. Bear you one another's burden, and so fulfill the law of Christ. In Revelations, what is this? 1:12, he quotes, and I turned to see the voice that spake with me, and being turned, I saw 7 golden candlesticks, and in the midst of the 7, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle. His head and his hairs were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire. He goes on to quote Revelations 1:15. I behold till thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garments were white as snow, and the hair of his head like that of pure wool. They quote Daniel 7:9. You shall not deliver unto his master the servant that is escaped from his master unto you. He shall dwell with you, even among you, in that place which he shall choose in one of your gates, where it like him best. You shall not oppress him. Deuteronomy 23. So they understood the scriptures as it related to what that they shouldn't do. And this is why he's saying the slave masters were preaching one thing, which I'm quite sure they wasn't preaching this one. They was preaching slaves, obey your masters. You understand? But the Deuteronomy scripture let you know exactly that you were not supposed to return a slave if they ran away, especially if they were being mistreated. It says, he that walk righteously and speak uprightly, he that despise the gain of oppressing, that shake his hand from holding of bribes, that stop his ears from hearing of blood, and shut his eyes from seeing evil, he shall dwell on high. His place of defense shall be the munition of rocks. Bread shall be given him, his waters shall be sure. Aaron's view on God's holy word strictly forbids us holding our brethren in bonds, and here in several chapters against it. It is such a fast that I've chosen a day for a man to afflict his soul. Is it to bow down his head as a bulrush and to spread sackcloth and ashes under him? Will you call this a fast and an accepted day unto the Most High? He put Lord here. Is not this the fast that I've chosen, to loose the bands of wickedness, to undo the heavy burden, and to let the oppressed go free, and that ye break every yoke? He's quoting the book of Isaiah 58. Is it not to deal your bread to the hungry, and you bring the poor that are cast out of your house, when you see the naked that you cover him, that you hide not yourself from your own flesh? Then shall your light break forth as the morning, and your health shall bring forth speedily, and your righteous shall go before you. The glory of the Most High shall be your reward. And then he quotes Matthew 7 and 12. So I'm guessing he's telling them what to quote. Therefore, all things whatsoever you would that men should do unto you, do ye even so to them. For this is the law and the prophets. Woe unto them that build his house by unrighteousness and his chambers by wrong. So they're basically condemning the slave master. This is why the slave master did not want you to read. I was reading another book recently that was, anyway, I won't go into that because I'll go off topic. Let me continue. And his chambers by wrong, that useth his neighbor's service without wages, and give him not for his work, that saith, I will build my house wide. I'll build me a wide house and large chambers, and cut him out windows and his ceiling with cedar and painted with vermilion. Shall you reign because you clothe yourself in cedar? Did not your father eat and drink and do judgment and justice? And then was it well with him? He judged the case of the poor and the needy. Then it was well with him. Was not this to know me, saith the Lord? They put Lord here, the Most High. But your eyes and your heart are not but for your covetousness and for the shed innocent blood, as for the oppression and for violence to do it. Therefore, thus saith the Most High concerning Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, the king of Yehuda. They shall not lament for him, saying, "Ah, my brother," or "Ah, my sister." They shall not lament for him, saying, "Oh, Most High," or "All his glory. Jeremiah 22nd chapter 13 to 15. He says here, "Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eating. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. You have heaped treasures together for the last days. Behold, the hire of the laborers who have ripped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud and cry, and the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabbath." They spelled Sabbath incorrectly, but I guess that's what they're trying to say. "You have lived in pleasure on earth and been wanton. You have nourished your hearts as in the day of slaughter. You have condemned and killed the just, and have done, and he do not resist you. Be patient, therefore, brethren, unto the coming of the Lord." He's quoting James chapter 5. So then they go into, I believe it is here, a baptism. Here I go to be baptized by the Lord, to be baptized. Sing glory is a song. Sing glory and honor the Lamb. Silver slippers on my feet and a golden girdle round your waist. Sing glory, and honor to the Lamb. Glory and honor to the Most High. Down to the pool to be baptized by the Lord, to be baptized. Here's the water enough to be baptized by the Lord, to be baptized. Sing glory, and honor to the Lamb. That's the way it is with the Christian when his warfare is ended here below. Here is a short sentence of the wayfaring Aaron. Okay, so they went through what was they were using to sustain them during their hardships. They were going into some promises that were promised them. I was going to say, I was reading a book. I am in the process of reading a book. She's the wife of a Georgia plantation owner. I think I spoke about her before. Frances Ann Kemble is her name. It's a European woman who came from England, married a planter, she married a rich man. She didn't know he was rich because they were enslaved. She went to the South, and she said something very interesting about the religion that they gave the slaves, as we're seeing here. She said they gave them basically just enough to kind of allow them to subside, but not enough for them to understand that they had no right, they didn't have a right to imprison them or to forcibly push them to be a slave. And so it is very interesting. She said that you're very spirited, basically, but it's not enough. Not the zeal is not according to knowledge, of which she's also quoting a scripture, which I thought was interesting. We well know that they knew what they were doing, and they did it methodically, as not to cause uprisings or insurrections. It says, when Aaron was in Hallowell in the state of Maine, a gentleman told him there were 52 strong anti-slavery families living in Hallowell, but he could not get a soul good enough to take him in. He thinks if he had been winter, he would have frozen to death, but providentially it was warm weather. He laid himself down on a harrow but the little red and black ants troubled him so he was obliged to seek shelter somewhere else. He tarried the rest of the night in a privy. When he arose, he found a beautiful morning, and he walked 4 miles, then asked a gentleman if he would give him some breakfast. He told him he was drunk and foolish and ought to go to the asylum. He proceeded to 2 houses further, and there the Lord opened their hearts. They provided him with a good breakfast, which refreshed him much, and they gave him food enough to last him 2 meals. The man who refused to give me a morsel then told me was a rich man. They told me was a rich man. Aaron thinks he is rich in this world, but he's afraid he will be poor and miserable in the world to come. He left God's blessings with them and proceeded on 9 or 10 miles. When a gentleman opened his house for a meeting, the hearers were very attentive. They can hear all the things as quick as a clap of thunder. Their heads are full of knowledge of the Almighty, but how does the heart stand? As empty and as destitute of the love of God as a pitcher. So this seems to be his theme. Now you do not hear of their sending many missionaries to Africa. The ministers are afraid they can't get any more servants to steal. So if you can't get nobody to steal, now you want to be a missionary. It says God's holy word says that he that sells a man shall surely be put to death, and if he is in his hands, that thief shall die. Aaron says that missionaries that are sent to Africa never will prosper, and he believes that ministers sent to Africa are sent for mere sham, and has told thousands so in his travels. The last time Aaron went in Connecticut State, I went to see Mr. Ludlow about purchasing my freedom. And when I got into the city of New Haven, there I saw a man that called me by my name, and Aaron was scared so I could hardly speak. A colored brother took me to Mr. Broadman's house. He advised me not to purchase my freedom, that no free man of color could live there. The first time I went to New Haven, I was conversant with Mr. Ludlow about purchasing my freedom. He told me he would see about it. The next time I went to New Haven, he was gone from there. He had moved to Poughkeepsie, New York. So Aaron has given up purchasing his freedom and has tried to consent himself here in the North. He says, God is merciful to us all, and he bears with us and forbears with us. A great many of the people are halted and blind so with sin and iniquity. They can't see God's goodness nor his wrath until it sinks them right into hell. And then they will see and cry for mercy. But God does turn everlasting deaf ear to them. They are shut up among the damned forever. Behold, his pouring wrath out upon the people of Guadeloupe and destroyed from between 15,000. So Aaron says, it was about a place in the traffic of human souls as under the whole globe. Behold, his wrath pouring upon the people, upon the wide ocean and sinking thousands in the sea. Nothing only for their wickedness, so Aaron says. Behold, thousands of men in the world getting mad with one another, going into field and cutting one another of by thousands, and leaving hundreds of widows throughout the world desolate with little children around them crying for bread to eat. Wicked, bad tyrants were sent to rule the government, which do not know their right hand from their left. So Aaron says, has pressed out these poor men into battle, has had them all cut off. It is nothing only the wrath of God for their sinful, wicked, bad doings. So Aaron said, it don't sound like nothing much has changed here, Aaron. When was this again? 1800. Nothing much has changed, Aaron. Page 23. United States, your banner wears two emblems, one of fame, alas, the other that it bears reminds us of your shame. The white man's liberty in types stands blazoned by your stars, but what's the meaning of your stripes? They mean your Negro scars. Oh, chill. I'm sorry. I gotta pull up, rewind. I gotta do the Jamaican pull up selector. Come back from the top, Aaron. Hold up. If anybody has anything to say, feel free. I'm gonna have to read that poem from the top. Let me make sure. It's a true story. Speaking real, someone asked, is a true story? Yes, it's a true story. If you're still on, the way it was written, it's a man named Aaron, but he says that he is not literate to read and write. And so he went about walking throughout the country trying to get some people, different people, to write the story for him. And so and for this reason, it was self-publishing of the day. So it doesn't seem like it went through much editing in that respect. And so for this reason, it kind of changes tenses. This is what we are deducing from what we're reading. But according to the narrative, it is a true story that he's walking around from place to place, I guess, interacting with people while slavery was still in effect, and measuring them up against the word of what they profess as Christians. So it says, and this is a poem. United States, your banner wears two emblems, one of fame, alas, the other that it bears reminds us of your shame. The white man's liberty in types stands blazoned by your stars, but what's the meaning of your stripes? They mean your Negro scars. Was man ordained the slave of man to toil, yoked with the brutes and fettered to the soil, weighed in a tyrant's balance with his gold? No, nature stamped us in a heavenly mold. She bade no wretch this thankless labor urge, nor trembling take the pittance and the scourge. O hail Columbia, happy land, the cradle land of liberty, where none but Negroes brand or feel the lash of slavery. Then let the glorious anthem peal, and down Britannia rules the waves. Strike up the song that men can feel, Columbia rules 3 million slaves. Talk about a spoken word. A short passage selected by Aaron from God's holy word. Let not your humble heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. 2, in my Father's house are many mansions. If there were not so, I would have not told you. I go to prepare a place for you. 3, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself. And where I am, there you may be also. 4, and whither I go, ye and the way you know. 5, Thomas said unto him, he says, Master, we know not whither you go, and how can we know the way? 6, Christ say unto him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No man come unto the Father but unto me. He's quoting out of the New Testament, John 14, 1 through 6. All right. When Aaron was in Athol, I fell into a house where there were several in the house, and among them was a sea captain about 70 years old. He had been dealing on the African coast. I had a long talk with him, and he told me the blacks were better off in the United States with their masters than they were in Africa. Says he, when the king's daughters die, they will slay 200 or 300 to honor the king. Aaron says it is a willful and malicious lie. The Bible says no drunkard shall inherit the kingdom of God, and also cursed is he that puts the cup into his brother's lip. Also no murderer shall inherit eternal life. Cursed is he that imbues his hand in his brother's blood. They carry liquor into Africa, and that ain't bad enough, so they carry guns and powder there, also shot and balls, and the sword, make them drunk and then compel them to fight. Whichever tribe conquers will bring to the whites those whom they conquer, and they will buy them by giving in exchange ribbons, beads, red shirts, and one foolish thing and another. And I was just reading that today. Aaron asked the above named captain who he is afraid of, who he is afraid is going down to hell with a bundle of sin on his back. If he didn't think God would bless the nation tenfold, if they would carry Bibles and hymn books there and send missionaries and teach them that there is a holy God above. Aaron thinks that God would bless Africa tenfold and England and America would be blessed tenfold. Some says, where is the nation that has been treated as bad as the poor Africans who inhabits the south part of Africa? And that's interesting. As I said, I was reading today, always studying in my spare time, and it goes deep with the liquor, what they say, cartel or business that actually started off, as I was reading, in Rhode Island, as well as certain ports, and that many distilleries popped up in those areas, and from there they took them to, and they actually had the thing I was reading, they actually had the pictures of these old jugs. And so when they say, 400 gallons of 400 gallons of whatever it is, fire water is what they said it was. That's what they were doing. They were inebriating, intoxicating the people. And I'll read it again because Aaron, as he's saying, he was talking to a trader who used to go back and forth, sea captain, and he says here that they would get them drunk, carry liquor there, get them drunk, carry the guns and the powder, then entice them to fight, and then conquer, and then bring back those who they conquered. And that's pretty consistent because even we read what the Alexander Falcon Bridge, and he spoke about them coming on board. He spoke about the chief men coming on board and them drinking and eating and having conversations. So definitely the inebriation played a role in what was happening. It says something like 200 miles in Africa is inhabited by the white men. The natives are cut off and driven back, and what ain't driven off are stolen away and brought here to America and the West Indian Islands. Their children are scattered among the white folks and held in bonds. It's true, the Indians are cut off from their country and driven back, but they ain't catched and made slaves of, and the women taken away from them and forced by white men, and the way the poor African is, the wayfaring Aaron. And then here's another poem. It says, corruption, earth, and worms shall refine his flesh, or this flesh, till my triumphant spirit comes to put it on afresh. Array in glorious grace shall these vile bodies shine, and every shape and every face look heavenly and divine. Father, accept the praise of these our humble songs, till tunes of nobler sound we raise with our immortal tongues. This is one of Aaron Virginia's hymns he requested me to put in. So he sounds like he liked singing. Aaron's views on freedom and slavery. It says, industry, diligence, and proper improvement of time are important duties of the young. In youth, the habitation of industry are most easily acquired, and the motives to it are strongest, both from ambition and from duty, and the prospects which the beginning of life affords. Industry is not only the instrument of improvement, but the foundation of pleasure. Nothing is so opposite to the enjoyment of life as the state of an indolent mind. Those who are strangers to industry may possess, but they cannot enjoy. Let me read that again. Those who are strangers to industry may possess, but they cannot enjoy, for it is labor alone which gives a relish to pleasure. We should fly from idleness as the certain parent both of guilt and ruin. We should never let it cross our path while young. Obtain industry in youth, and it will never lose its hold. Aaron says our southern brethren were reared up in complete idleness. They have blacks to wait upon them, to feed them and carry them to bed when they are between 8 and 9 years old, reared up in complete idleness. Then when they are reared up, they go to gambling and cockfighting. Aaron's old master and mistress owned 8 slaves, and among them was 3 females. They had to take night about and sit up all night to fan their master and mistress to keep them cool after working and toiling all day. So they it's called sleep deprivation. And we heard that also. I'm sorry. We heard that also in Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, when her aunt lost, what was that, 6 children, if I'm not mistaken, because she had to sleep on the floor of the mistress' house, Mr. Flint's wife. And so he's saying after toiling in the field, now you became their fangirl. Okay. It says here, Aaron says that if you females remember your brother in bonds as though you were bound with him, and will try to do all that is in your power to deliver them from the sinful, indolent life, I long to see the day when the white people live at the South as they do at the North, not debar the poor African who has to toil out under the hot boiling sun and deprive them of everything that is just and right in the sight of the holy. Sorry, he says God here. Aaron thinks, according to the reading of the Bible, that the Most High forever knew or foreknew everything, and that the Most High saw that Pharaoh was determined to keep the children of Israel in bondage. That's the train that's passing. All right. Where are we? The Most High taught such a time that they should keep them in bondage, and that time was 400 years and no longer. If it was right for the Egyptians to hold the Israelites in bonds, the Most High would not have brought them out. Did not the Most High say that he would bring out the Israelites and bring the Egyptians to judgment? The Most High sent Moses and Aaron to deliver them, and they were something like 20 or 30 years about it. And it seemed that Pharaoh was determined to hold the Israelites in bond. The devil made a complete fool of Pharaoh, so he was swallowed up in water and woke in hell. Pharaoh, he bound the chains tighter and tighter around the Israelites. The poor wicked slaveholder that is living now upon the face of the earth does not know his right hand from his left in bringing the chains tighter and tighter upon the poor slave at the south. And Aaron is afraid that they will not hearken to justice until the Most High sinks them in sin and folly in the same way he did the wicked Pharaoh. The Most High had a foreview of the white man holding the African in bonds, according to the reading of the Bible, because he says, you may go and buy of the heathen, and they shall serve you forever, and they shall be inherited to your children forever. That is, if your hearts are wicked and bad enough to do so. But remember, after death, the Most High will bring you into judgment. You must take the Bible as it reads, and it is a bitter guide against slavery. If it was not a bitter guide against slavery, why does it say in so many different places, you shall not hold a fellow mortal in bondage? The slaveholders can't see to read the Bible because their hearts are shut up with sin and iniquity and is stained with the African's blood. When every man is dipped, okay, he's going into the J Dazzle. When every man, he says here, is dipped in the blood of Christ, he's a new creature. Then he can see to read God's holy word, and he will not read it and say it is right to hold his fellow mortal in servitude and traffic in his own flesh and blood. Any man blessed with mortal principles will not stand up and justify slavery and say that it is right. No, we just as well might say that it was right for the Most High to send down his son from above for the wicked Jews to put to death. He's going in right now. It says here, God Almighty sent his son down from above to preach to the people, to tell them the way to fly from iniquity and be saved in his kingdom. But the Jews were very wicked and bad, like the people nowadays. They took the Holy Lamb and slayed him, and God Almighty blessed the Jews with the power, and he blessed them with the strength, but he did not bless them in the heart with the wicked bad deed. Who was it that blessed them with the wicked bad deed? Aaron thinks it was the devil that blessed them with the wicked bad deed. Else they would not have taken the Holy Lamb from above and put him to death. Aaron thinks all the Jews had condemned Christ is now numbered among the damned in hell and always will be there until the end of time. All the horrors and iniquity of slavery Aaron has seen in the state of Maryland and in the state of Kentucky, in the state of Old Virginia. Aaron says they do not raise rice there. They do not raise cotton there. This all grows in South Carolina and Georgia. Aaron says that in the last of December, they fetch up sugar and molasses. They fetch up rice and cotton and trade it off in Old Virginia for little black boys and girls between 6 and 7 years old, and take them down into South Carolina and Georgia and sell them and get the money for them and put the money in their pockets. Poor mothers are robbed of their dear little children, and there is not Ephraim nor anathema said about it. Aaron's views upon half-hearted Christian people standing up in the eyes of their brethren and sisters, and not only in their eyes, but in the eyes of a holy God too, and justified slaves, saying it is right. What's interesting, Aaron was going in on his understanding just now of the Bible as it was written, as he understood. I find it interesting that he paralleled, which we often see in these narratives, he paralleled Egypt, the Egyptian slavery, with the slavery in the Americas, the Caribbean, South America, North America. We see this often, and this is why we see many who are at this time understanding and subscribing to the understanding that they are Israelites, just exactly what we saw here with Aaron, and understanding that they are coming from, not only to say that they took them from Africa, but that we are Israelites as well. And this is the parallel between the slavery. But it's also interesting to note that Pharaoh's heart in his description, in Aaron's description here, was hardened. And he's also saying basically that the hearts of the Europeans were also hardened, even though they knew and they were reading, it was still hardened. So that leads to other questions, something to ponder on. Then who was really hardened in the hearts? Because we read in the book of Exodus that it says that the Most High hardened the heart of Pharaoh. And so whether or not this condition was something that they were doing of their own volition, or was it something that was coming from a divine order, as he's relating the stories? That's just a question that came to my mind. Aaron, how do you feel and fare for about the first week after you left your master? Oh, good man, after I together, what it says, I and another slave that come with me start away from our master for more than 1 week. I suffered dreadfully. So I did, cause I am the time. Let me go back. Because I all the time did think master overseer was close to my heel behind to catch me. And I like most starved to death. So I did. For after I got into Ohio State with nothing with me to eat, and I was afraid to stop at the houses where folks was to beg. So afraid some anyone would catch me, and run me back to my master, which I dreaded that most like death itself. So I did. And dear man, how I lived, I don't know. For as true as you live, I had to creep with it when it was dark to get I had to creep where it was dark to get where folks did keep their stuff for the hogs to eat, and did eat the very swill. So I did, not as we read the prodigal son did in the Bible, because he left his father's nice home, but because I was going to get freedom, which God blessed me to get, that freedom which you white folks have, and don't think much of it. Your white folks, so I guess a European is writing this for him. Sorry. He says, your white folks tell a good deal about this nation's liberty for the 4th of July. And folks tell me when the voters meet to choose the people's rulers to serve their master God in his fear and for the constitution liberties of everybody in this big nation. But I guess your white voters don't mean, or else don't care much about the poor slaves, because if they did, I guess they would not vote to make the president of the nation out of the slaveholders, or some men just as bad as slaveholders. If they don't hold slaves, for so the folks tell me, and I guess it's true. When Aaron was traveling in Connecticut state, I stopped at a tavern in Windsor along the Connecticut River. It was pretty cool weather. I asked the tavern keeper if he wouldn't be good enough to give me a comfortable straw bed and sleep for 25 cents. I told Aaron his customers did not like it when he took in a colored man. I then asked him if he wouldn't be good enough to give a pallet in the bar room. He would not do it, and I had to come away. I went about a quarter of a mile further and stopped in a young lady's house. She told me she would willingly take me in, but her husband did not like colored people, and he would only scold me if I took you in. She told Aaron to go to the minister. He was a good, benevolent man and would give me a good, comfortable bed to sleep in. I went as she told me and asked him if he would be good enough to give me a place to lie down in his kitchen, and he would not do it. Then I asked him if he would not give me an old blanket and let me sleep in his barn. He told me he could not very well. Well, she was wrong about the minister. Aaron bid him good night and told him the Lord would provide somewhere for me to sleep tonight. I went about a quarter of a mile further, and the Lord opened the heart of a white widow lady, and she took Aaron in. I told her if she would give me a place to lie in the kitchen, I would put my hand on my mouth and thank God. I was very tired and weary. She told me I should not sleep in the kitchen, but she gave me a candle and told me what chamber to sleep in. And I went upstairs in bed, and Prince Edward never slept in a better bed. And she and her son made me welcome to stay over the Sabbath. With all his Christianity, he had not grace enough to keep Aaron one night in his barn. Aaron says it did not astonish him none, for Aaron thinks the 2/3 of the ministers' heads are filled with knowledge of the Almighty, but their hearts are empty and destitute of the love of God, as empty as a pitcher. I guess that's one of his taglines. They preach more for the money and for pop. I can't. Yo, this could be like 2016. Boy, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Aaron says here, they preach more for the money and for popularity than they do for the people's poor souls. That is the reason why sin and iniquity so much abound in the land. If these ministers were men after God's own heart, slavery would not abound in the world as it does. But when sorrow and affliction comes against them, they will flee like lightning. But they cannot preach unless you give them $1,500 or $1,600 a year. Then they will preach. For preaching free salvation to all mankind. If they were men after God's own heart, they would preach for 200 or 300, and they would not rob the widow and the halt and the blind. All right. This picks up here. That's interesting. I mean, he just took a page out of today's book. He just took a page like that just happened. But I see here, I guess it changes writers, which is very interesting. It says Pious Slaveholders by Eleazar Wright. So now it's no longer Aaron, I suppose, speaking. This is Eleazar Wright. Let me go here. Where did I go? If anybody has any questions or anything to say, feel free to let us know. Hold on. Again, like I said, this is an interesting narrative. I'm trying to get through. Okay. Bound so tight. Yeah, they don't know their right hand for their left. Aaron was going in. Some of them poems, I mean, that's some stuff that could be recited today. You know, some of them poems he's dropping is some real stuff. It says, Pious Slaveholders by Eleazar Wright. I have no more disposition than I ever had to demonstrate how much men may dabble with dishonesty or defile themselves with oppression and yet be saved. How much men may vocally or silently consent with thieves and yet be honest. How much they may involve themselves with laws and customs worthy of devils and yet deserve sympathy and consolation at our hands as Christians. They may be Christian pickpockets, Christian horse thieves, Christian swindlers. For aught I know, I am not profound on this argument, but I think such Christians do not honor to a church, much less to a pulpit. So this person is also burning a fire on this same thing, and not much change. That's basically what I'm saying. January 15th, 1842, Aaron was traveling throughout Assinet. I stayed all night at the house of Mr. Nicholas, and he entertained me very hospitably. I left his house next day between 3 and 4 o'clock. You all know the days are very short and cold here at the north. When I left his house, the wind blew very cold and night come upon me, and I thought I should freeze. I asked 8 or 9 families to entertain me, but I could not get any of them to keep me. And I traveled on, and God opened the heart of a good Samaritan, and she entertained Aaron, and she entertained me like a brother. And her husband was almost 3,000 miles away from home, and not a soul was in that house but her and 4 small children. And yet she was not afraid to entertain the wayfaring Aaron. It was dreadful, keen, cold night, but the Lord watched over all that dwelt under that roof and brought us all to behold the light of another beautiful morning. And she refreshed my unworthy body with a first-rate breakfast, fried beefsteak, and good light biscuit. And she gave me a first-rate cup of tea that struck through every nerve. That was not all she done from Aaron, but she told her oldest son to go out and hitch up the horse, and we got in, and she told me all the way to Fall River. That is 5 miles she carried me, and she gave Aaron 25 cents in money. She was one white lady out of 1,000. She took Aaron in and kept me from freezing to death, and she gave me first-rate victuals to refresh my unworthy body. Her name I have forgotten, but her face will always be in my presence forever. She is the daughter of the Reverend Anderson or Assinet. He has been pastor of the church in Assinet for 40 years. He was a revolutionary. So I guess this person is writing for Aaron, Eleazar. So I guess this is the first person who put his name on. He's writing the story, the narrative. It says, Aaron has formerly been a slave in the South and has seen pretty hard times, and also in the North and in the West. Aaron has been through all the New England states and has told his sorrow and affliction in 32 churches, besides in halls and schoolhouses and dwelling houses. These sorrows and affliction can be proved by 70,000 men with the poor slave has to undergo in getting away from the hard taskmaster. Aaron says if the white men were all like Ward Richards in West Bridgewater and Jesse Torrin in North Amington, Mr. Foster in New Hampshire State, who was dragged out of the church in Nashua, Orson Murray in Vermont, who prints the Vermont Telegraph, Mr. Gay in Hubbardston, Mr. Bradford, who preaches in the Congregationalist Church in Hubbardston, Mr. Garrison, who was dragged through the streets of Boston with a rope around his neck, Mr. Hanning in Cadiz in Ohio State, Mr. Stansbury in Lancaster, Ohio, Dr. Caleb Swan of Easton. There would not be a slave in the United States, but there are not like these men. Aaron thinks that God has got a crown richly laid up in heaven for these men who have suffered heavy persecution on the right hand and on the left, because they have stood up for the rights and liberties of the poor African man, who is good enough to stand up and fight for country in time of trouble, and who have been slain down by the hundreds, but are not good enough to enjoy their freedom under these free and independent colors. These free and independent colors float at the Capitol. Aaron says in this free and independent country, there are almost 3 million slaves kept. A lash on the back is valued at 40 cents in Virginia and Illinois. The law, which is common to both states, run this: in all cases where free persons are punished by fine, servants shall be punished by whipping after the rate of 20 lashes for every $8, so that no servant shall receive more than 40 lashes at any one time, only $16 worth of whipping at one time. Wow, they done calculated the whipping into dollars and cents. But in the creation, oh man. Yep. Let's continue. The slave Joseph, come, said Judah, and let us sell him. Oh, he's talking about Genesis. Come, said Judah, and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites. And the rest agreed to it. Then there passed by Midianite merchant slave traders, and they lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. Poor boy, his father had sent him on a kind of errand to his brothers and was waiting for his return. A Southern gentleman in the debate of Lane Seminary thus describes the punishment of the paddle. A bricklayer, a neighbor of ours, owns a very smart young Negro boy who ran away, but was caught. When his master got him home, he stripped him naked, tied him up by his hands in plain sight, and hearing of the academy and the public green, so high that his feet could not touch the ground, then tied them together and put a long board between his legs to keep him steady. After preparing him in this way, he took a paddle, bored it full of holes, and commenced beating him with it. He continued it leisurely all day. At night, his flesh was literally pounded to jelly. It was 2 weeks before he was able to walk. No one took any notice of it. No one thought any wrong was done. The following instance occurred near Natchez. New York Evangelist for January 31st, 1835. It says, a plan to purchase a notorious runaway. He gave to him to understand that he could elope if he chose, probably in a tone which warned him of the consequences. The Negro took him at his word, but was soon taken and flogged very severely. His master then opened the gate and told him to go again. And he said, but was in a few days retaken. He did, but was in a few days retaken. His master flogged him, if I recollect, till he fainted, and yoked him in the fence between rails during the day. The wretched Negro escaped a third time, but was able to elude pursuit only for a few days. This time his master beat him till his black was almost raw, knocked out his eye, teeth, yoked him in the fence, and poured spirits of turpentine over his bleeding wounds. The poor Negro fainted on account of the intensity of his suffering. My informant received this account from the planter. The two following cases are communicated by Mr. Birney of Kentucky. Not very long ago in Lincoln County, Kentucky, a female slave was sold to a Southern slaver. under most afflicting circumstances. She had at her breast an infant boy 3 months old. The slaver did not want the child on any terms. The master sold the mother and retained the child. She was hurried away immediately to the depot of Louisville to be sent down the river to the southern market. The latest news my informant had of her, that she was lying sick in the most miserable condition. Her breasts had risen, inflamed, and bursted. During the winter at Nashville, a slaver was driven his trains of fellow beings down to the landing to put them on board a steamboat bound for New Orleans. A mother among them, having an infant of about 10 months old to carry in her arms, could not keep pace with the rest. The slaver waited till she came up to where he was standing. He snatched it from her arms and handed it over to a person who stood by, made him a present of it. So he snatched the woman's child out of her hands and gave it to some stranger. The mother, bereft in a single moment of her last comfort, was driven on without delay to the boat. On the side of the oppressor was power, but she had no comforter. A man I did not learn his name in Scotty County, Tennessee, kept a room apart, which no one entered but himself and slaves. One poor man he kept in it 2 or 3 days, going in often and whipping him. No one of the family dared, if they wished, to go in to rescue him, to his rescue. His cries and groans were so dreadful that the third night, a young lady living there got the key secretly and went to the room. The most appalling sight presented itself to her view. The floor covered with blood and pieces. Oh man, come on. The floor covered with blood and pieces of flesh. She released the almost murdered man. He fled and had not been heard from. The shrieks extorted by this cruel man were often heard of neighboring plantation at midnight, day dawn, and other times. Right. The Blind Mother, another poem. If anybody has anything to say at this time, feel free to do so. This is the poem, The Blind Mother. Let me check. It says, I saw a mother in her arms, her infant child was sleeping. The mother, while her infant slept, her guardian watch is keeping. Around its little tender form, her snow white arm was flung. O'er its little infant head, her bending tresses hung. Sleep sweetly on my darling babe, my own, my only child. But as she spoke, the infant woke, and on its mother smiled. But oh, no friendly answering smile the mother's vicious grace, for she was blind and could not see the infant she embraced. But now he lisped his mother's name, and now the mother pressed her darling, much loved baby boy unto her widowed breast. But sudden anguish seized her mind, her voice was sweetly wild. My God, she cried, but grant me sight 1 hour to see my child. To look upon its cherub face, to see its father's there. But pardon if the wish be strong or wrong, a widow's mother's prayer. And as she spoke, her anguish grew more loud and yet more wild, and closer to her aching breast she clasped her orphan child. We shall be overrun with them. That's the name of the next chapter. He says, if ghosts were flesh and blood and flew in flocks, the spectres of beggary and crime conjured up by, we shall be overrun with them, would darken all our northern air. This objection, when waged against our measures, implies the conviction that they will be successful. When argued against emancipation, it implies that slaves are kept where they are against their wills. It implies also that those who make it would keep their slaves in their chains rather than run the risk of having here and there a colored neighbor. If the objector were to see the slaveholder knocking off the chains, throwing away the whip, and giving wages to his laborers, he must needs cry out, stop, stop. If you pay your laborers and treat them well, they will quit you and rush to the north. Who makes this outcry? An American who, while he boasts that his country is an asylum for the oppressed of all nations, would perpetuate the oppression and robbery of his own countrymen, lest some of them should find an asylum in his own neighborhood. But his objection is a bald prophecy based on no facts, contradicted by history and human nature. If slavery were abolished, the slaves would choose to stay at the South as hired laborers rather than come to the North. Reasons, he states, They are already here, and the trouble, expense, distance to be traveled, time necessary for journey, etc., will forever dissuade the main body from migration to the north. Second, he states, there is far more room for them in the slaveholding portion of the U.S. than in non-slaveholding. In the former, there is 1/3 more territory and 1/3 less population than in the latter. Third, the climate of the South is congenial to them, that of the North uncongenial. Four, there's far less prejudice against the colored man there than in the North. Five, so he's giving reasons as to why I guess the Europeans would say we would be overrun with them. That was their thought. That's the Negro dilemma, huh? He says, four, there's a far less prejudice. Okay, five, they are remarkable for their local attachments. There's one of their peculiarities everywhere. Wherever they are to be found, this aversion to change of residence, especially to a distant removal, is proverbial. All travelers in Africa unite in this testimony. Edward's History of the West Indies, Walsh's Sketches of Brazil, Marthason's Notices of Samatora, Dr. Dickinson's Mitigation of Slavery. He's giving, if you have the link is in the box. If you want to do extra research, these are books that, I'm going to look up. So you should look it up. Sturge and Harvey's West Indies in 1837, Thomes and Kimball's 6 months in Antigua, Barbados and Jamaica abound with testimony to this trait. So he's basically saying that these Europeans have traveled and found that, quote unquote, Africans don't like relocating, don't like traveling much, and they would rather stay where they are. And this goes over to today, where people say, and I think I did a video of that. Hey, what's up, class of Shabazz? Much props. Okay, you catch the video later, no problem. And hopefully you'll come back so that we could you could join the conversation as well. But what was I saying? Yeah, so the question was, do quote unquote Black people travel? Do Black people like to travel? And a lot of people say no. So this is what he's substantiating, basically that stereotype or that thought process that Black people don't like to travel. And for this reason, they wouldn't even want to come to the North. You really don't have anything to worry about. So if you freed them, they would just stay where they were. He says, we insert from the latter work a few testimonies of ex-slave holders in Antigua. The Negroes are not disposed to leave the estates on which they have lived unless they are forced away by bad treatment. H. Armstrong, Esquire. So who knew? In the patchwork book of Aaron, we got some references. He gave us like 5, 6 references to definitely check out as it relates to more stories of the planters as well as slaves. It says, nothing but bad treatment on the part of the planters has ever caused the Negroes to leave their estates on which they were accustomed to live. And I would have to say, let me continue. The Negroes are remarkably attached to their homes. James Holwell, Esquire. The Negroes are particular for their attachment to their homes. Another, S. Bernard, Esquire. Love of home is very remarkable in the Negroes. It is a passion with them. Dr. Daniels, member of council. I mean, you really have to consider, and I also saw this in the book as well. I want to give you the name of the book. Weevils in the Wheat, when they were, I saw this a few times, where the emancipation came, 1865, the Civil War was over. This is firsthand accounts, and they were saying, one woman, a few of them were saying they didn't want to go anywhere. Why should I go? They treat me well here. And they stayed on to the plantation. And like he said, and they paid them. And I'm like, huh? But you have to consider, after being forcibly ripped away from your home, you understand what I'm saying? And your life is hanging in the balance and you're all in uncertainty. For you to, it does something to you, at the very core of who you are. So it may not just be overall a trait that you don't want to move around, but it's also connected to the trauma as well. So these are plantation people. These are Europeans noticing this, but without noticing what happened before this point. I don't know if that's an all in all fact, or is that just one related to the post-traumatic slave syndrome. It says, an aged planter said they have very strong local attachments. They love their little hut and will endure almost any hardship before they will desert that spot. And Aaron says he has formerly been a slave at the South, is eyewitness to it. Mears, Thome, and Kimball say Such are the sentiments of West India planters, expressly in the majority of cases spontaneously, and mostly in illustration of other statements. We did not hear a word that implied an opposite sentiment. One gentleman observed that it was a very common saying with the Negroes, "Me never leave me barn grown," i.e. birthplace. I mean, I read that in Patois, but it's kind of read like Patois, but he said, "Me never leave me borning ground." In Caribbean, they ask if your navel string is cut at a certain place, and that's kind of like the same thing, like your placenta, your navel cord, was it cut there? Meaning you didn't want to leave that, you always like to stay at that location. So I could kind of attest to that saying as well. Have you heard a saying like that? I have. Has anybody out there heard a saying? Let us know. It says, the slave rarely run away from mild masters now. When they become their own masters and are protected by just laws, why should they leave their native region to roam among strangers in an uncongenial clime? Slaves, when emancipated in the South, stay there unless driven out. Further, he says, now it's not to say that people wanted to, he's talking about they didn't want to leave after being emancipated. And also, there was opportunity to leave, to go back to Africa, not necessarily to where they came from, but to Liberia. They actually brought up and started a fund. The fund escapes me right now. I'm sorry, the name escapes me. But they came together and started a fund to send now the freed slaves, again with this dilemma, what are we going to do with them, back to colonies in Africa. And they didn't want to go. So that they didn't want to go. Now that they're here, okay, we might as well stay here. That was kind of the sentiment. So that project failed, and they kind of, only a few thousand, if I'm not mistaken, went, but it wasn't anyone compared to the amount that should have left if you're thinking, it's time for me to get out of here. Anywho, it says, further, he says, the forces were daily increasing, and they felt themselves so strong and secure that they had commenced several plantations on the fertile banks of the Apalachicola. I'm sorry if I jacked that up. Apalachicola, which would have yielded them every article of sustenance. Can slaves take care of themselves? And which would consequently in a short time have rendered their establishment quite formidable and highly injurious to the neighboring states, and end quote. So we're going to stop here because we have a little bit more to go. Tomorrow will be the final day on this one. And then we're going to start on another one. So this was a little bit longer. So we're definitely going to stop here. I want to thank you for tuning in with us. My eyes are playing tricks on me because I'm having to look at the computer. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Well, I'm going to thank everybody for tuning in. And my name is Amuna Yisrael. This is Solonomics 101. Solonomics 101. I told you my eyes is playing tricks on me. This is the Left Project. And I want to thank you for tuning in. Again, tell a friend if you're enjoying this conversation. Again, the light and truth of Aaron of slavery. And this is a narrative by Aaron and his those who helped him to pen this story. And so hopefully I'll be a more rested Amuna Yisrael. Tomorrow is Wednesday. If we do read tomorrow, it will be earlier, but I definitely will post the update on social media for those who tune in live. For everybody else, you can just catch it on the replay. But for those who tune in live, I might look into posting it early. Or if not, then I'll reconvene on Thursday. Most I will. So once again, thank you for tuning in, and everybody have a blessed night.